everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. I'm Stu Hardy, joined, as always, by Derek Brissett. Derek, I think Christmas has come early for Canadian rugby fans. Canadian men's rugby fans, I should say.
Yeah, it's a Christmas miracle, as they say, and it's nice. Taylor Swift's not the only one bringing eras to an end out in BC, and quite frankly, couldn't be happier.
Yes, the news has come through that Kingsley Jones and Rugby Canada have, by mutual agreement, decided to part ways. And, I think
Mutual
this,
agreement.
mutual agreement, as in
Mutually
we
agreed
both,
upon.
you're not, I'm not fired, I quit kind of thing. So the official press release has been released by Rugby Canada, and they talk about, with the 2024 season concluded, as work continues towards qualifying for Rugby World Cup 2027, Rugby Canada and head coach Kingsley Jones recognized the need to set Canada's men's rugby team in a new direction and have mutually agreed to part ways. They then go on to say his pivotal role in the reboot of the Pacific Pride, the return of age grade programs following COVID-19, development of Canadian coaches, and all the players that are now playing in MLR and have played with Rugby Canada. The senior team's national team's average age isn't 24, which is a thing, I guess. And
Wait,
shows that his Jones saw the men's rugby team through qualification of the 2019 Rugby World Cup, and him and the team's efforts in the cleanup in Kamaishi in Japan following Typhoon Hagibis. During the 2019 World Cup, they're suspiciously quiet about his involvement through the 2023 Rugby World Cup. But, and then we have obviously Jones saying, "It has been an honor and a great experience for myself and my family to be with Rugby Canada over the last 7 years. Discipline, hard work, and professionalism of the great people in this program are second to none, and I would like to thank the players and staff for their commitment and support." And then Nathan Brombris, the Rugby Canada CEO, said, "On behalf of Rugby Canada, I would like to thank Kingsley for his dedication and contributions to rugby in Canada over the last 7 years. We wish him and his family the best in their next chapter." And then they conclude with, "Rugby Canada has already begun work on the succession plan, with further information to be announced in due course. Jones will stay on to see Rugby Canada through this transitional period."
Hmm.
Huh.
Yeah. Oh, I guess maybe it was more mutual than I thought. Um,
Well,
yeah,
well, I think more mutual in terms of how much money gets paid out,
yeah.
but I think this, for rugby
I
fans,
don't
this
think he should be
is,
staying on to find a successor to his thing. I don't think we need that. That's a little much for me, but
yeah, but I think for a lot of Canadian rugby fans, especially of the men's 15s team, this is
yeah.
just over 3 years late, but
Yeah.
better late than never. Um, I
Well, I think
think.
I don't know. I think
Give me your thoughts first, Eric.
yeah, I think well one, I think like reading the press release, I mean like the Pacific Pride program coming back under Kingsley Jones as the head coach of the Canadian, that's a genuinely good thing. Right? Like we need the Pacific Pride program and it's cool to see
Mm.
that it returned. It is like, there was a lot of players that did get capped this year, right? And a
Hmm.
lot of those guys did play a few games for the Pride or seasons for the Pride before coming up, right? And that also includes, Phil Mack, who was the coach of the Pride and then is now was or I guess he was the attack coach for this past 2024 calendar year. But, it's so I mean, like I think that is a good thing.
Mm.
Beyond that, though, I think, releasing a like the press release, and I understand that Rugby Canada is going to write about Kingsley Jones's time in a positive manner because it is Rugby Canada, right?
Yeah.
I'm not really harping on the press release, but I think when you kind of look at it and when you have a guy that's been your coach for 7 years and the biggest highlight that you can point to is cleaning up a typhoon. It probably wasn't a great run, you know.
Mm.
Like nothing against helping out a local community clean up after a natural disaster. That's actually a very cool thing that Rugby Canada did. But I feel like over 7 years, that shouldn't be that should be like a neat thing that happened and not necessarily
Yeah.
a highlight of a coaching tenure. Um, and I think, like you said though, it's something that feels would you say 3 years too late? Is that what you
Yeah.
said? Three?
I said just over 3 years too
Yeah.
late.
Going from like when they lost to Chile and then yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like I like you know what? Like I was kind of thinking about this, I think like this week. 'Cause I guess the news isn't necessarily fresh. Like they got released like last Wednesday. We're recording this on Tuesday, December 10th.
Hmm.
So it's like it's not super fresh, but it's like I have kind of been thinking about it and it's like yes, I think something should have happened after they lost to Chile. I feel like I can almost forgive um letting him run out his contract for whatever reason. I'm not sure if that bothers like other than the fact that obviously the team was bad during
Hmm.
that time. But it's like, okay, the contract was done. I think though a year later, sitting here in December 2024, like the decision to re-sign Kingsley Jones I think is an indefensible decision from Rugby Canada. Um,
Mm.
a 2 year extension. He's not even going to make it to the second year, right? And I think that decision, like you had an out, right? You didn't have to re-sign Kingsley Jones.
Yeah.
You didn't even have to fire him. You could have been like as polite as the press release announcing his departure was. You could have
Mhm.
literally been like, "Hey, we appreciate everything you've done for us over the last few years. Sorry that we didn't get the results that we wanted. But it's time for both of us to move on. We're not going to renew your contract. Let me just say that. It's nice, it's polite.
Yeah.
It's just what it is. But I think the decision to re-sign him, like quite frankly, it has done nothing but set the program back an additional year. Because I know later in this episode you want to talk about, who's potentially going to replace him or who we want to replace Kingsley Jones or whatever, right? And quite frankly, I think that's a conversation we should have been having a year ago.
Yeah.
And it's too like it, everything about this, it feels too like you said, like it's a little relieving that it's done, right?
Hmm.
It feels like, hey, maybe Canada, maybe the men's national team, we can finally start moving on, start rebuilding the program. I said, so it's like we've been talking about wanting to see signs of change since that high performance program review came out,
Yeah.
right? And it's like, and for the men's 15s team, we really have not seen anything significant. And this feels like the first actual significant tangible change that you can like latch onto to say that this era is finally coming to an end. But at this end, I think there's relief in that from like the fan base. But at the same time, it's like you really cannot I just can't shake the feeling that it's far too late. Um, like you said, it probably should have happened after they lost to Chile. It a
Yeah.
1,000% should have happened. The re-signing should have never happened.
Yeah.
And I think that might be one of the worst decisions in rugby, if not all of sports history. Um,
Yeah.
and I just to re-sign him and like this season was absolutely terrible as well. The only thing that I think you can positively take from this season is that there's a handful of guys that got their first cap, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's something that will never not be cool. Players
Hmm.
work really hard to achieve that. I don't think you can ever take that away from them. It's special to those players, right? And but beyond a few of those few guys that did get their first caps, like um nothing, I don't think anything the program did not progress in any way this year. And
No.
I think you look to our friends south of the border, and it's kind of tough to like have watched this year and be like, okay, like now we're finally starting to rebuild it.
Yeah.
It's nice that it's happening, but like you said, it's far too late. But as the saying goes, I guess the best time to plant a tree was like 10 years ago. The second best time is now.
Yeah.
However, that saying actually goes. But so I guess we're in that moment.
Mm. Yeah.
It's better to happen now than I guess waiting for his contract to end the next time. But like you said, there's numerous times over the last at least 3 years where
Mm.
it should have happened. Um, and
Yeah.
it's disappointing that it's taken this long, quite frankly, but it's nice. It is relieving that it has happened.
Yeah. So from my perspective, so Kingsley Jones was hired under the tenure of Alan Vanson as CEO of Rugby
Yeah,
Canada. And, we all know um about Vanson that he is a um businessman first and foremost, and he understands things like the need for infrastructure to be in place. I mean, like physical infrastructure. So it was under him that the Al Sharon High Performance Training Center was built in on Vancouver Island. But he didn't really understand the I don't say politics of rugby, but is in the as in rugby as a sport, as opposed to
yeah,
understanding like sport as a whole in the professional environment that it is in terms of like what is required in terms of a age grade performance level. And it's been mentioned that under Kingsley Jones we had the return of Canada men's age grade performances following COVID-19. So, we can potentially give him credit for that. But I think when Kingsley Jones was first signed on, which was in mid 2017, and this was after Canada had failed to qualify for the America's one spot between themselves and the United States.
yeah.
And he was brought in, and his contract was get these guys to the World Cup. You have 2 years. And so obviously they lost the series against Uruguay, and then they went to the repechage,
Mhm.
which, they could have been up against a team like Romania. They could have been up against Spain, but they were disqualified. So they had an easier journey, and they were able to get the clean sweep to get them to the World Cup. And I think at that point, it was like, this guy got us to the
Yeah.
World Cup. As a result, we are going to give you the 4 year contract until 2023. And then obviously, we know what's happened. But I think with his 2 year extension, now that Nathan Bromvis was brought in, there was probably a release clause in it. And, this isn't exclusive to Rugby Canada. There's already been talk for Warren Gatland for Wales, for example, of saying that there may be a release clause in his contract following the 2025 Six Nations if the results don't line up, that the
I mean,
Welsh Rugby Union could have the option to like step in and say, we expected this of you. You haven't perform that, therefore we are going to replace you. So that's why I think this has come around, in that there was probably following that 4 year contract. I don't think that had a break clause in it. I think it was like, you are contracted to the 2023 World Cup because you got us to the 2019 World Cup. So therefore, we expect the exact same thing. We don't need to put this break in it. However, and so this time around, they said, well, you didn't get us to the last World Cup. You have at least um, 5 games or like 7 games that came out from this year. You need to get at least 2 victories for us to
yeah.
consider that you are on the right track.
That's two victories. What a low bar.
You can say like, okay, you're going up against Scotland and you're going up against Japan, both of which are classified as like tier one nations. So we'll say, okay, you need to get 2 out of 5.
Chile
Of,
beat Romania. Like they played enough
yeah,
teams on here that they can beat. I think though, I don't know. I think like the issue though is it's like whatever the contracts were worded, like whatever reason Rugby Canada had to keep Kingsley Jones for the full 4 years through 2023, whatever
yeah,
reason, like it doesn't really change the fact that it's like the extension, especially the extension should never have been signed. Like no,
yeah,
like that's the mistake. Isn't the mistake? Isn't isn't letting Kingsley Jones go today. The mistake is like re-signing him a year ago.
yeah. No, that's
Mistake.
something
That,
I'm like agreeing with. I'm just saying out of what has currently happened,
but even
this
at
is
that,
why I think. But I agree with you. Like
yeah, like it doesn't
this should
matter.
not have been like back in. Well, I can't say 2021 because basically as soon as Nathan Brombus came in, he should have led the search of finding a new men's
But see, that's
senior
the thing
15s head
though,
coach.
right? All right, so like moving on, well, not really moving
Yeah,
on, like to different topics around. Like, I mean, I feel like I don't know. Like, there's a part of me that's like, I do feel like we've spent so much time talking about all the issues we have with Kingsley Jones as a head coach.
yeah.
And if you would like to hear us do that again, I just want to know who hurt you and like why, yeah, like why we don't need to do it again. I don't know why you like to feel pain, but like that's fine. Um, but I think like with Kingsley Jones, I think like one of the things that I have seen popping up um a lot in like the week to follow, right? Is like identifying that Kingsley Jones isn't the only problem with Rugby
Yeah,
Canada, right? Kingsley Jones is a problem with Rugby Canada, but Kingsley firing Kingsley Jones, letting him go, however Rugby Canada wants us to be wording this right now. But you know, get Kingsley Jones moving on, and the he's no longer the head coach isn't going to magically fix all the problems at Rugby
no,
Canada.
not at all.
Right? And there is things like, even going back to like, there's obviously, I don't know, like development issues, grassroots level issues, coaching development. There's resources, financial resources, the Al Sharon Center being on Vancouver Island in the furthest west part of the country, what kind of setups are around the rest of the country where the guys, there's a whole lot of other issues that Kingsley Jones's departure isn't going to
Yeah,
solve, right? Um, and I think like part of that though too is it's like we do have to pick a new head coach. Somebody's got to pick a new head coach. We don't have to pick the new head coach. That's not our job. We get to
no.
speculate on who we want, but we
Hmm.
get to pick it, right? But I think like that's kind of the problem too, right? And we'll get into a few of the articles that did come out, but I think like in starting with this, like you said, like Alan Vanson, right, was at the helm at Rugby Canada. He left. I think he left shortly after the whole disaster at the Olympics, right?
Yeah.
Shortly after
So
that, right?
I think is yeah he left
Yeah,
in
yeah,
early 22.
yeah. Shortly after that whole debacle there. But like but like so Vanson goes. We bring in Nathan Bombrys, bring in Stephen Aboud, right? Like two new guys that are going to be like at the helm of Rugby Canada and stuff. And we're like looking for like okay, like obviously we've had the high performance review and stuff. We need a lot of things to change. And like the first big decision that I guess maybe not the first big decision, but like a very early on big decision that Bombrys had to make, right, is well, like who is the coach for the men's national team going to be? And the decision was to re-sign Kingsley Jones, right?
Yeah.
It's like that was the decision that was made, and it's like now that same individual is going to be in charge of finding a new coach, and apparently is also based on the wording in that press release, as you said, right? maybe using Kingsley Jones to help him find that head coach, or I don't know why it was worded as what, help in the
Uh,
transition process. Like,
what I basically think that means is that he's
eh,
sticking around until the
no.
decision has been made, because I think it's also a very awkward time in a Rugby World Cup cycle to be bringing
I
in a new coach. Again,
doesn't
you're right. This should have happened like a year ago.
I mean,
And
ultimately it doesn't matter though. But I think like
yeah,
the point is like, you know, do we trust like the Rugby Canada brass in charge to make the correct decision here as well? Right? Like how many like there's because obviously there still needs to be other things that do change at Rugby Canada, but now this is going to be a huge decision that they have to make on the 15 side, all right? And the
yeah,
last time they made the decision, they did kind of screw it up.
yeah,
And it's undeniable. Like they didn't even get he didn't even get to the second year of his contract,
yeah,
right? And so it's like you have to go through that, and it's a bit of a reminder that I think like Rugby Canada does need to fundamentally change how they think as an organization, because the reality is that Kingsley Jones resigning is an indication that under whatever metrics they were using at the time, that he was doing a good job
yeah,
to at least the people in charge, right? Which is concerning, especially since it only took a year for them to see the same thing that everybody else sees, right? And not understanding that. So now we're kind of back to like, okay, so like they got to make the decision on the new head coach. And it's like they're very much right now 0 for 1 on on that decision so far, right? And they gotta a year later they gotta do it again. Um, I hope it works out a lot better this time.
mm,
But like there is still there's a lot that needs to be happen with Rugby Canada. I think within the organization and with the sport of rugby as a whole in Canada, Kingsley Jones isn't going to solve it all,
mm,
but like at least it's something. But like I think the whole organization I think needs to recognize that the direction that it's going in currently is not working, and like we need to shift a lot. And it's like it does even go for like I mean like the women's teams are obviously kicking ass right now.
yeah,
But like even things that's like funding and stuff like that, there's a lot of things that can be improved on the women's side of the game as well too, right? And obviously the women's team has been doing very well under Bombries, and he's in charge of all of Rugby Canada, not just the men's team, right? So,
yeah,
like it's not necessarily all bad
hmm,
from his point of view, um but yeah, it's a big decision. And it's like but I still think going back a year, it's a little alarming that this was the decision that was made a year ago, right?
yeah,
It's like we gotta here we are, we gotta do it again. Um, right. And it took them a year to make the decision, I guess, that it should have happened a year ago, which is Kingsley Jones should not be the coach of this team anymore. But here we are, still talking.
yeah. Yeah, I think that leads into what people are expecting from this decision and contrasting that with what is actually going to happen. And by that, I mean getting European players, well,
Ooh,
players
yeah,
based in France.
let's talk about it.
Will they come
I think,
back
see,
for?
can I throw out something though before we kind of do discuss this?
Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Every time we word this, I think every time we do talk about this,
Yeah,
I think it's like everybody's like, the guys that are playing for France. Obviously, there's elite Canadian players playing in France. But I think the other thing that I feel like the one thing that is also kind of feels like it got kind of slipped under the radar a little bit. What happened to Ross Brody? He's playing
um,
rugby in South Africa.
yeah.
Yeah, like what like right? Like
So, so actually, this is
actually know? Do you
the
actually know
see.
something here? Okay.
I don't know anything clearly, but so I
Sure.
don't have
Don't
any.
know
But
anything.
this is all like rumor and speculation. This is actually something that was brought up on Squidge Rugby's video, talking about Kingsley Jones and players deciding not to play for him.
Yeah.
And they've talked to players off the record. We've spoken to players off the record as well, in that there is a clear divide between what Kingsley Jones was aiming to achieve and what the players are aiming to achieve as well. And the atmosphere and the environment was so toxic in that there was such a conflict of what each party wanted that players have just thrown up their hands and saying, it's not worth
I
it for
think,
me.
yeah,
It's not worth the stress. It's not worth the arguments. It's not worth um
I think
this, that, and the other. And we've
maybe,
seen it when Kingsley Jones is doing like a post-match interview and he's not taking responsibility for anything. He's blaming the players because he has this old mindset of, I coach them the best they can, but when they're on the field, they make their decisions. So it's not my fault anymore. And it's like
I think,
that doesn't inspire anyone. That doesn't help anyone. That's basically like, don't blame me. I wasn't the one who, had the ball intercepted, or I was the one who got tackled. And it's like such a stupid, outdated
well,
mindset. And
I think that's kind of the thing though too, is like I said a few weeks ago, is like Kingsley Jones has done a great job of making himself the lightning rod. I think for the team and for, like, because everything that does go wrong, we just inevitably end up complaining about Kingsley Jones. Um,
yeah, but it's then who does Kingsley Jones blame?
then yeah, for sure, Kings right, but Kingsley Jones also has that. But it's also
Yeah,
like I think now it's like, okay, well now he's not gone, right? And
yeah.
it seems like some people think that all these guys that are playing around the world might will come back now, and we already got an article suggesting that that might not be the case.
Yeah, let's talk about this first and foremost. So, Canadian international, currently playing in France. The only Canadian player that's ever played in Super Rugby, Tyler Ardron, um,
He's pretty
believes. So the opening line says, former Canada captain Tyler Ardron believes Canada's decline as a rugby playing nation in the last decade is not purely down to one man, the outgoing head coach Kingsley Jones. So one quote that he says, "We could have the best coach in the world there in Canada, and with a record like that, you wouldn't expect someone to stay. That's the professional sport I have always known. In the world of high performance, change needs to be made when the results are like that, and I am surprised that it took this long. I have never been a guy to hold back any punches. I tell it like it is. The coaches have to be held accountable, but I don't blame Jones solely for what is happening." And then he goes on to say that um, when it says whoever takes over will have a tough time convincing Ardron to make himself available for Canada. He's saying, with Ardron saying, I don't see any clear path for them to go forward. They have got a new CEO, Nathan Rombris, who's been in there. It's got to be 2 to 3 years, but I've never had a call from them. But I'm not going to go begging for a game for them when I have got my life set up so well over here. For me, if Castros were playing against Toulouse in the top 14 and Canada were playing Chile or Portugal, I have only so many games left in my career, and it's pretty obvious which one I'm going to choose these days. He then goes on to say that he I am not in the system, so I don't know what the sentiment with the guys is. I am looking from the outside in when it comes to qualifying for the next Rugby World Cup, but I wouldn't put any money on it, that's for sure. And so
I like that he's like, I don't pull punches and then just throws punches for the rest of this. Oh, that's although
that
although
he doesn't pull punches as in he doesn't hold back. He's going for the knockout every single sentence
although
he's saying.
come on, Tyler, you don't talk to the guys on the team. Come on,
Uh,
yeah, come on.
yeah, I think he talks to some guys,
Some of
but
them, I'm sure. But I
so
think like
but I think this, like, Tyler Ardron is probably like the best person to speak about from this because he saw Canada squeeze past Chile in the first game of the series for them to qualify and basically said, if I don't do anything, these guys are not going to qualify. So he paid for his own flight to Santiago. He paid the fine that Castrev put on him because, again, this was outside the international window. He shouldn't have been available,
Yeah.
and he went over to Chile on his own dime because he was convinced that if he did nothing, they were going out. Now, obviously, one man doesn't make a team, and the result was historic, and we all know it, and we don't need to go back into it. But if you have spent that much money coming over because you care about your country and you care about your team so much, and then after that, you hear nothing, you have, if you have contact with the coach, it's like, hey, are you playing any games nearby that I can, I don't have to basically play a transatlantic flight to get to? I may be interested in it, but then he also has he's made the clear point that he's made out. Like the guy is 33 years old. His career is in the autumn, I'd say. And, he is playing in one of the toughest leagues on the planet in the top 14. He needs to make the decision, and he has to make the decision based on what is going to help him further down the line. And it's very much the case for him that is he going to take the national duty of playing for Canada, or is he going to take the money payout of paying for Castres? And I have to agree with him, right? We've got a number of Canadians who are playing in the top 14 or the
Yeah.
Pro D2 for, they're basically playing there because they are incredibly talented and they are needed in those positions. And as such, they're going to take the money. And especially with a sport which is so physical, which, you know, we basically see like every single month a player has been injured and has not recovered, so they have to retire. And now it's like, oh, you have to go into a completely new career as a result that you may not be prepared for. Having a nest egg certainly helps. So you have a number of guys uh that we're saying like, oh yeah, now that Kingsley Jones is gone, we can have all these guys back. But the reality is that, a lot of these guys are, a bit gone in their ages. They only have so many games left, and I do not blame them for going and taking the money. Like, so the article lists Tyler Ardron, Evan Olmstead, and Matt Bookaboom. Matt Bookaboom is 27 years old. Evan Olmstead, I believe, is 33 at the time of recording. Ardron is as well. So but let's say, for the sake of argument, that these guys do want to play for Canada again. They get the right coach in, they make it to the World Cup. They're going to be like 36, 37
Yeah.
playing at this
I think
at in Australia. Is that really like the guys that we want to have now? Now, obviously, we can say these are the guys we wanted to have for 2023,
I
but
I think there's a
it's
I think there's a different angle to that. First of all, just because I don't think you said it, if anybody does want to read this article where Ardron is talking about this, it's on Rugby Pass. The author's name is John Newcomb.
yeah,
Um, but I think part of what I think when I'm like looking at this though is I think there's a few layers to it. One is I think you do reading the article and the quotes, I think you really do get the feeling that Ardron's trying to convey, like how upset
yeah,
he is. And he does seem upset about the way everything is played out. That is how it comes across in the article. I think so on one hand, I think you mentioned the age of some of the players, right? And obviously these would have been guys that would have been like, you know, maybe awesome to have, like, because like you said, like even that qualification game, maybe not a true full, even that qualification game against Chile, which they did lose, probably, I guess not really a true full strength Canada, right? Even with Ardron flying all the way over.
mm,
But I think part of it though seems to be that there's a lot of players that seem like they've had a bit of their relationship be disrupted with Rugby Canada. And I
yeah,
think like part of that is that you, in general, I think it's something that the next regime that's in charge of Rugby Canada, the next coaching staff, you should be like looking to repair. And like if Nathan
Yeah.
Bombriz hasn't spoken to Tyler Archeron, maybe you should do that. Um,
Yeah.
but like I think in general though, 'cause to me, like you said, by the time the next World Cup rolls around, some of these guys might be 36, 37 years old or whatever, right? They're still also probably some of the best players that we have. So if you are
Mm.
at a World Cup, you take the best. You don't need to worry about how old they are. But the other end of that is though, is it's like, okay, even if they're not actively playing, it might be nice to have like, what if you had like Ardron as a forwards coach or something? Like,
Yeah.
if like, is there a pathway that you can go that it's like, okay, maybe something happened, maybe some bridges got burned after 2019 or after 2021, right? Can you
Mm.
repair those bridges though and be like, all right, you know what, you guys are some, especially Ardron, like Ardron's arguably the best Canadian player ever, right?
Mm.
I don't know. You could probably argue a few guys. You probably don't put him outside top five,
Yeah. Yeah.
but
But yeah, I see where you're coming from of that there is such a wall that Rugby Canada put up of
it
we are not going to indicate how you can get to this within Rugby Canada, and that is from a age grade perspective, that's from a player perspective, and that's from like a coaching perspective. Is
sure,
that it's basically seems to me as though what Ardron wants to do, and I want to bring up another player in a minute who has gone a step further, is that if Ardron wants to get into coaching, he has to speak to someone at Castres or speak to someone at the French Rugby Union and become a coach there to then get the possibility of being recognized by Rugby Canada of his coaching capabilities.
it's not even that though, but it's like the repairing isn't. It's like you need these guys to want to come back,
Yeah,
right? Like that's also part of it, right? Like even looking at it, yeah, it would probably be nice for like Ardron to come back and help, or Olmsted or whoever, right? And it's like
yeah,
to me, it is about repairing that relationship because it's like you look at a guy like Jamie Cudmore, for example, who played that elite top 14 level, right? And is coaching, in Canada. I think he went back to France for a minute. Did he? I don't know. I'll edit that part.
he's so he's been coaching like in
Dude,
New Zealand as well.
yeah, he's bounced around the world.
Yeah,
Um,
he's been here, there, and everywhere.
but
But the
comes back though, right? So it's like you can
yeah,
have that experience if guys like want to come back. Now I'm not sure who the other player you were about to bring up is, but I think in circling back with this conversation about like you want guys to want to come back,
yeah,
right? Um, you did mention a few guys that are over 30 right now,
hmm
but there's one guy that is uncapped by Canada, in Tyler Duguid, that certainly would be nice to have. Um,
Oh, oh,
yeah.
because that's the player I want to
No.
name because Tyler Duguid has gone on the record of saying that he would like to play for France.
Yes, but
And
that was
I know
last week. That was before last week. But yes, he did
uh,
say that. I know it's frustrating,
yeah,
but I know he did say that.
that was obviously before Kingsley Jones
But that's the thing. It's like,
parted ways.
is this?
But
Well, that's the ultimately though. That's the big question.
yeah,
Because let's say what it is. Duguid is the best player we have under 30. Um,
yeah, he is
how old?
24.
24. He's the best player we have under 25. I was going to say, where do I want to put
Yeah,
the age cutoff on? Because he's the
yeah,
best player under any significant amount, right? So he's definitely the best player we have under the age of 25, right?
yeah,
And he's without a doubt that he hasn't been capped. His brother's playing for Canada, right?
yeah,
But like, so it's like there is that, and it's like, okay, you're right in that he did say in a French article, news article, that he would like to play for France,
yeah.
right? What do you got to do to make sure that doesn't happen?
Yeah, I
Um,
so
because
but
we do need that dude.
so
So
this is a symptom of a bigger problem, like beyond Rugby Canada's scope, and this is for any well, let me explain. For any men's player in the top leagues, which includes the top 14, the English Premiership, the URC, um, is that if you are not a player of that nationality, and with the URC, that includes all five nationalities, your chances of breaking into that team are very limited because these leagues now have caps on how many foreign players they can have in their team. So, for example, back when Ardron and Jeff Hassler were playing for the Ospreys, the number was much higher than it is now because the league said we want to develop, domestic players for Wales, for Scotland, for Italy, for Ireland. So they reduced the cap on that. In the Premiership, there was a player for the Saints who was eligible for Kenya and decided to play for Kenya in the repechage, hoping that Kenya could make the World Cup. And as a result, he could no longer play for Northampton Saints because his nationality became Kenyan, not English, even though he has a British passport, and therefore was cut from the squad. And when it comes to France, now France is a bit more lax. They bring in a lot of international players, or in this case, like non-French players. But for Tyler Duguid, he was told in 2021 by his coaches that if he had a French passport, then he could apply for the Blues. Now, he has been in France since, I believe,
He can qualify.
2019.
Yeah, he can qualify. I
So
think the
So
big
yeah, he qualifies on residency. If he gets French nationality and a French passport, then that option is open to him. Now, obviously, that alone is all up in the air. That his coaches say that he can apply for the Blues, but
here's I
the
think
French Rugby Union may be like, well, we've got a load of second rows already. Why do we need to get you into the mix?
I think there's two ways to really go about that. One, nobody's forcing you to do anything. You can go play where you
Yeah.
want to go. But more importantly, in regards to the, you know, um, they have, foreign player caps and stuff in those leagues. It's no different than anywhere else. If you're good, they will find a way to keep you,
Yeah.
right? That's it. If you're good, they'll find a way to keep you. And then beyond that, it's just a matter of, do you want to play for Canada? That's it. That's all that there is to it. And it's like if you're Rugby Canada, you have a
Mm.
young player that has gone to France that
Yeah.
has not been capped by Canada yet. Like we
Mm.
just said, he's the best young player you have under the age of 25, right? What do you got to do to convince him to play for Canada? Right? Because
I think that
his
is,
French team, if
yeah,
for the French from the purpose of the top 14 team, if he's good and he is good, right?
yeah,
They're starting him. What? They
yeah,
will keep him. Like nobody, the French teams didn't throw back Jamie Cudmore because he's Canadian. They're not throwing back Ardron. They're not throwing back Olmstead because they're good and they know that
yeah,
teams need them. If you're
yeah,
good, they'll find a way to keep you,
yeah.
right?
And do you know
So
what that way is? They'll keep you.
paying you.
Yeah. And do you know what they say?
What do they say?
They say, if you don't pay for your country, we'll pay you more.
Well, then you have a decision. But that's part of the thing, though, right? Is then
Yeah.
you have a decision to make. So that's on Rugby Canada and whatever they've done to this relationship to be like, convince these guys to play for you. Like that's what you have to do. Like it's yes, you can pay them, but then that's also like that gets into these other elements of the infrastructure, right? Then that you can be like, okay, like how can Rugby Canada pay their players more, right?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
market. And
That
it
is
opens
the
the doors a
bigger
whole other
question to have.
conversation. But
Yeah.
also, right? But also in a weird way too, what do we got to do to get the MLR to a point where it's like the MLR can pay players,
Exactly. Yeah.
right? Because it's
It,
like you're saying that there's all these leagues have foreign player caps and stuff, and it's like, well, why don't we play in the I mean, it'd be nice if there was a Canadian team back, but for the sake of argument, we'll call it the MLR the domestic league, right?
Yeah.
Um, like you can have all these Canadian players playing in your like the domestic MLR, right? The North American League, where they're not considered foreign players and stuff. But again, like you said, with getting paid, you can get paid a lot more in the top 14, which is why guys go to the top 14 to begin with.
Yeah.
It's a long process and stuff for sure, but like how do you get to that point? Like I think it's just ultimately even with the money and stuff, it comes down to two things. And I think it's just on the Rugby Canada point of view, you have to ensure that those players want to play for you. You have to foster
Hmm.
an environment that they want to be in. Like you said, even with that Ardron story, right? It's like you said, it's like he paid a fine
Hmm.
for leaving, right? And guess what? He's still there again because
Yeah.
good and they need
Yeah.
him on their team. You can do
Yeah.
whatever you want if you're talented enough. You genuinely can. That's just life advice in general. You can basically get away with anything if you're
Uh,
good enough to do it.
Yeah. And but the
Like,
question comes up is that when do you know when you're good enough or when you're not good enough anymore? And
when you
that
when you play
and
for Canada and don't get
e-
cut from your top 14 team.
exactly. But
That's
do you want to find that out the hard way? Do you want to say like I want to okay, Canada is in the final qualification tournament. I want to play for Canada. I want it's only going to be 3 games, 3 weekends. I'm going to go and do that. It's in the international window, so I am eligible to do that. I'll go do that. And then you come back and the coach says, you're wearing the practice bib. Um,
great.
you better hope someone gets injured or we get a lot of calls up for the Six Nations because that's where you're going to be the rest of the season. You're not going to get match fees. You're not going to get this and that because we needed you here and you went elsewhere.
Well, then again, if you're good, somebody else
Yeah.
will up.
Yeah. But that if is carrying a lot of weight
Hey
in
man,
that.
if you're a coach in the top 14 and you want to ruin your team because you're mad that a guy went to an international tournament, so be it. If you're good, they'll keep you in. If you're good enough to stay in the lineup. That's
Yeah.
like suspending a kid from school for missing too many days. It's like you're punishing yourself at this point. You want that kid back in the classroom. You're just being a bad teacher at that point. Um, but either way, I think like moving on. Do you want to
Yeah.
speculate and talk about
Yeah, I think we can talk about
you think
who would we who do we like? Who would we like to see step into the role of Canada men's
hmm,
head coach, and who do we expect will
yeah,
be taking in the role? Because I would love to see Sean Edwards take a shot at the head coach
okay.
role. And he's been with France, I believe. This is his fifth fifth year now
Is
since
this a realistic one? Or like, are
no,
you
no.
realistic or
This is
uh,
my personal choice. This is my personal choice
yeah?
of who I
Are you
think.
taking? I'm just asking, like, are you taking a you actually think this could happen approach to it, or like,
No, 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 no.
oh,
This is fantasy. This is this is definitely fantasy booking of who
okay,
I would get as head
that's
coach.
fine.
So that would be my fantasy choice. Who would be yours?
Honestly, and it's not um who I would like to see is different than who I think is going to get it. But I think like so. I I think to circle back to the beginning of this discussion where we were talking about how this feels like it's a year too late. Um,
Mm,
part of me is like it's a year too late, partially because of player development, anything that happened this year, but also because coaches that were available a year ago aren't available anymore.
yeah.
And I think there's a
But that's why I'm saying like, okay, make a fantasy pick and then we'll
yeah,
make a realistic pick.
yeah. So like I think my fantasy pick, I guess, has a little bit more realm of realism than yours, but
Yeah.
I was gonna say Scott Matthew.
Yeah.
And I feel like he's a guy that's name has come up a bit. I think he would actually like that's the thing that annoys me with that. I know he's moved on to Edinburgh, and their attack he's as their attack coach, and they're killing it over there.
Yeah.
So I feel like the Edinburgh might be very happy with what he's doing, which is concerning for this take right now. But like I think I look at like Scott Matthew, who's obviously had a lot of success in MLR, right? He won back-to-back Shields with New England. But most importantly, the core players on those back-to-back Shield winning teams are basically all Canadian, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a lot of Canadians on that team. And so it's like he's a coach that seems to get the best out of a lot of the Canadian players that are on the team, right? Like we kind of talked about a few weeks ago how, it seems like one of the frustrating things about watching Canada right now
Mm.
is that, Canada, some of the players, play really well in the MLR and then they get to like the international stage and then we're just like, all right, like you don't look like the same guy in a weird way, right? And I
Mm.
think Matthew has been a guy that's obviously getting the best out of those Canadians. And
Yeah.
that, like, of the guys that he has coached, right, the most success they've had in their careers is with Scott Matthew as a head coach.
Yeah.
It's just like it would be great to actually bring that to the national team. And my additional thing for Scott Matthew as well that I think would have actually made him a great fit is that he's got no ties to Rugby Canada, right? So he
Yeah.
does check that box of being like, in my opinion, bringing in somebody from the outside to be like, you can bring Matthew in and be like, let him pick his assistant coaches, let him dictate what the culture is, because there needs to be that big culture shift and stuff too. And sometimes a big culture shift is really difficult to do when
Mm.
expecting people that are within that culture that needs to change the culture, right?
Mm.
So I think I think Matthew just all around would have been perfect. But I feel like it might be a year too late on that one.
Yeah. I think like
Or,
that is a decision
or
you have to have.
as you mentioned with your previous conversation,
Yeah.
money. Does
Yeah.
Canada have money? Who knows? But if you do have
Yeah.
money, maybe you can find the number that actually
Yeah.
moves them away from Edinburgh.
Okay, so my more realistic take is that okay, when we're talking about money, Canada doesn't have that much.
Oh,
So you can't break so anyone you'll be getting, you'll have them break a contract that they have with their club or their county or whatever. So immediately that eliminates any national team head coach, any top tier coach. So that probably includes like Matthew as well, playing coaching in the URC. So I've had a bit of a look. I mean, some names have floated around, like people have said, oh, Phil Mack should take the reins. I think while that's good, I think that he could always use a bit more experience. Others have said Jamie Cudmore. Again, I think he's a great coach. However, with his history, I don't think that would be a good hire to have as the national team head coach. Um, but so I was doing a bit of searching, and um, I've chosen a foreign coach that has the potential. They are not currently coaching a top team, but they do have a great list of experience. And they have specialty in being hands-on with grassroots, taking players into a professional environment, getting them ready. This guy has experience not only in his home country, but in France. Has you know been part of the coaching structure that won the top 14, made it to the Heineken Cup final, made it to winning the Challenge Cup with his English club. Mainly worked as an attack coach and a defense coach, and briefly made the switch to coaching in Canada, but unfortunately, that never came to pass. So
mm.
my pick would actually be the coach that the Toronto Arrows were going to have for the 2024 season that never came to be, and that is Stephen Meehan.
Oh yeah, that's an interesting one. Yeah, I guess. Well, I mean, I think the big part of that is he already did a kind of, I guess, agree to come to Canada. Um,
Yeah.
I think I don't hate that pick. It's like, again, it would check my box of like, somebody that's outside of Rugby Canada. I guess we
Mm.
never really got to see what he could have done with the arrows,
Yeah,
unfortunately. Um, but yeah, I think that I don't know. I don't hate that. Like, I think that is going to be a part of this coach search though too, right? Is
yeah,
you're gonna need to find somebody that wants to come to Canada, wants to
yeah,
be part of Rugby Canada, right?
yeah.
So
Actually, something that I had speculated before
mhm.
is that Rugby Canada have to make a choice of, do they want to have a coach to get them through qualifiers, or do they want to have a coach all the way to the World Cup, regardless of if Canada is there or not? Because that's so basically, do they want to have an interim coach that gets the job done that could then be promoted to permanent head coach? Or do they want to get someone in for the set number of years, wait until that's expired to then make a decision when the next World Cup cycle begins again?
It's
Because I think that's going to be a interesting decision for them to make.
because okay, so it's kind of funny how you said that. Because in line of like what closer to what I think is going to happen. I was actually thinking it's like give somebody an interim tag might actually be a good idea.
Mm,
Right? You go interim head coach, right? You go an interim head coach, you give them a little bit, you know, see what he can do with the team. If it works out, keep him. If it doesn't, um, right, you can, obviously hire somebody else with little, I guess, pushback or whatever, because it's an interim tag, right?
hmm.
Sometimes those coaches work out really well. Um,
Yeah.
and I think the only thing that I don't like about my decision necessarily is that it's not going to check that box. And I'm like, the person should come from outside of Rugby Canada.
Hmm.
Um, I don't, which I think I think I might still rather see, but I think if you're going to promote someone from within Rugby Canada, then Phil Mack is the clear choice to do that. Um,
Mm,
in my opinion, I think if you look at Phil Mack's coaching resume is actually pretty good. I know that you said that you would like to see some more experience. No better way to get experience. Trial by fire.
mm,
Trial by fire.
yeah.
Let's go. But I think if you really look at Phil Mack, right? Phil Mack is a guy that won 2 MLR shields as a coach. People kind of forget about that because he was a player coach, but he was
Yeah.
his coach, right?
Mm,
So he's won 2 MLR shields as a coach. He then took that and then was the assistant coach with Cudmore for the Pacific Pride when the Pacific Pride was being developed, right? And when Cudmore left, Phil Mack became the head coach. I mentioned earlier in the podcast that Phil Mack got promoted to the attack coach for the national team this year.
mm,
Ultimately, that puts him in a very unique position of not only having coached the Pacific Pride, right? Which means that, as
mm,
Rugby Canada mentioned in their press release, a lot of young players, a lot of guys getting their first caps, average age of the
mm,
team's 24. Phil Mack's actually coached a lot of them, right?
mm,
There's guys on the team, like I guess in the old that there's guys on the team that played with Phil Mack as well,
mm,
right? So there's going to be that respect and like, you know, friendship and bond or whatever you want to call it that is already going to be there. Most importantly though too, I think not even most importantly, but I think like for those reasons, if you're promoting someone from within Rugby Canada, it's clearly Phil Mack to me. But I think
mm,
Phil Mack might also have some weird X factors that um that like might actually help him in this a little bit. One, which Canadian rugby fan doesn't like Phil Mack? You gonna be mad at Phil Mack for anything? It's
mm,
Phil Mack, right? Like you're gonna get I think if you appoint it to him following Kingsley Jones, right? Even if the team struggles for a little bit, you're going to have like the fact that he's Phil Mack buys him time with the fan base
mm,
immediately because everybody loves Phil Mack. He's a legend, right? Probably a lot of fans' favorite players, right? He's a very popular player, both sevens and 15s, right? So you have that. Here's my other random X factor. If Nathan Bombrys picks up the phone and calls Tyler Ardron, I don't know, maybe he ignores it.
Mm.
What if Phil Mack picks up the phone and
Mm.
like that's a complete piece of speculation,
Yeah.
right? But it's like again though, it's like rugby always kind of gets talked about as like, that sport, it's like, the blood, sweat, tears, jubilation that you might share with your teammates, the bond of like, the players that you play with. That's kind of like unbreakable bond. Rugby talks about that all the time. If Phil Mack calls some of these guys that are overseas in Europe, does that entice them to come back more? If they know that they're playing for Phil Mack or playing under Phil Mack or with Phil Mack, is that something that he can do? Again, that's
Mm.
just pure speculation on that, right?
Yeah.
But it's like Tyler are maybe some of those guys in Europe are maybe they're not willing. Maybe they weren't willing to play for Kingsley Jones. Maybe they won't be willing to play for a foreign coach that they've never met.
Yeah.
Maybe they play for Phil Mack. I don't know. Right.
Yeah. So
It-
when I
it's
say
a bit of
for
total speculation that they will.
yeah.
But I don't know. Maybe he's got some X factor. The fact that he's a Canadian rugby legend and seems to be a pretty good coach. And I think like I think you can maybe spawn some of that off on the idea of Cudmore as well. But I think it might be an easier sell to have Phil Mack just take that. That's why I'm saying interim tag, right? Because then
Mm.
you just bump him from attack coach to head coach, interim head coach. But I'm not saying full head coach. I don't know.
Yeah, I think for me with Phil Mack is that I would like to him to have like more experience in as part of the coaching staff of a senior men's rugby team, just so that
Again, he won
he
two
is.
MLR Shields.
Yeah, I understand that, but in the test environment, just on the grounds of I don't want to set him up for failure. I don't want to push him to the forefront, expect the world, and then be
No, I don't.
disappointed.
I don't want
And as in, I want to make sure that when he does become head coach, because I feel that's a case of
to.
when, not if,
Okay. Yeah.
he's at like his best possible opportunity. And you know what? You may be right. You may say like, we'll stick him in as interim head coach for this year
That's
and
exactly
then
why I'm
make a
saying
decision
interim.
afterwards.
That's why I'm saying interim. So it's just be like,
Yeah. So
we'll give you, I wouldn't even say a year, be like, I don't know, have a couple camps or whatever and be like,
mm,
get the July test window.
yeah.
Let's see. And then
I think that's a good idea
right.
to
Get
say
the July
essentially
window.
basically go,
Yeah.
okay, you have these guys are going to be playing in MLR.
Yeah.
These guys are going to be playing for the Pride. These are the other guys that are available. Maybe guys that are playing for the Vancouver Highlanders who have like club fixtures and stuff. We are going to set up a couple of camps, and you're going to take those club guys in BC and basically put them through the ringer, make sure that they are able to compete at the test level. Then when we get to the July window, you'll have more guys from the Pride, you'll have the MLR players. But also during all this time, get on the phone to France and see if any of those guys want to come along and if as in like come along for the July window because they'll be contractually able to play in that international window as well
Yeah.
and say we want to give you this opportunity. We want to show you how much we've changed. And if we can't impress you, then that's fine. We say we say like we did our best, but if you prefer to be playing in France, that's all we can do. We'll have to make the decision of qualifying for the World Cup, but we can at least say we reached out. We can at least say we gave it our best shot.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I think it's nice, like you said, it's nice that we can, I think, have these conversations now on like who is going to be the head coach.
Yeah.
Kingsley Jones just wasn't working out. And like I've met him a couple times. He's a nice guy. Like I got nothing against him on like a personal level or anything. Um, I hope he can land on his feet somehow. Whatever that means to him. And
Mm.
maybe he finds success with another program or another team. It's just unfortunately it didn't happen here, but
Yeah.
I
If
mean, he was the coach for 7 years, so
yeah,
the
if
whole duration of this podcast. So all the best in whatever he
yeah.
decides to do next.
I'd say the thing that stands out that what other people have talked about, like Squidge Rugby in his video, is that his coaching style is outdated.
Yeah,
And so what I would wish for him is that he takes the opportunity to admit to himself where his coaching strategy isn't working, is prepared to learn and grow as a coach, and that he, wherever he goes, whether that is at test level, club level, wherever, he can be successful in that endeavor. And and so I want to conclude this section with, one thing that stood out for me and Kingsley Jones in the positive light. And it goes back to 2019 with the cleanup following the cancellation of their game against Namibia, because that happened before COVID, before World Cup qualification route, before all this. And it was only because of the Pacific Nations Cup that Canada were in Japan for the first time since 2019. And the in the opening of the game, the Japanese people and the people of Kamishi thanked both Rugby Canada and Kingsley Jones for what they did. So, so that is something that I do um, thank him for, and I do appreciate him for. And again, I wish him all the best in his next endeavor. Now, on the topic of Rugby Canada, there has been some international rugby that has been taking place because the women's sevens team, fresh off that silver medal at the Olympics, have been taking part in the 2025 version of the sevens. Now, you may be saying, Stu, it's still 2024, to which I say, hey, shut up. It's the 2025 edition, and we have had two of the seven rounds already, both in Dubai and Cape Town. Now, in Dubai, Canada finished eighth, and in Cape Town, Canada finished fifth. But Derek, did you notice anything different about the Cape Town Sevens this year?
no, no, I'm not gonna lie, I did not watch it.
Okay, so for most sevens tournaments and the Olympics, it's three pools of four, and then the top eight go through to the medal matches, right?
Hmm.
Well, for Cape Town, they instead did four pools of three. So you only played two pool games, and then wherever you finished in your pool, that determined which level you would go on to. So if you finish top of your pool, you go straight to the semifinals. If you finish second in your pool, like Canada did, the highest you can get is fifth.
Hmm.
And if you finish the bottom of your pool, the highest you could get is ninth. And now some people like this because they feel like, okay, overall, there's fewer pool games that each team has to play. So instead of playing three, they play two. And then they're only playing two games in the playoff section. So that's either going to be going, for the gold, or it's going for fifth, or going for ninth. And you're guaranteed two games in that. So four games overall instead of minimum of three pool games, and I believe um one or two finals games,
Hmm.
or three pool games, and then three um, cup matches or finals matches. And people were saying like, oh yeah, it just cuts down on time, it allows so days aren't like 12 hours long and stuff. And I'm like, that's great and all, but the whole point of this current format of the sevens was that it reflected the Olympics. And this doesn't reflect the Olympics.
Man, don't ask rugby to use logic. Don't ask
No.
World Rugby to use
I
logic.
mean, overall, I think these are good results for Canada. We're still having that playoff format. This in 2025, it'll be hosted by LA as the final round. So finishing eighth or higher is always a great indication because it means that Canada won't be in that playoff relegation pool. They'll be going in for like the up sevens winner pool instead. So, as long as they finish eighth or higher, that all works out for me.
Hmm.
Now we come back to North America and to the MLR because Macron has released all 22 kits for the 2025 MLR season. Ladies and gentlemen, Merry Kitmas.
Eh,
And some of these kits are absolutely beautiful and
and some are
are not as good.
not as nice. Yeah. No.
Okay, so as we said, 22 kits that have been released. You can find these all on MLR's website as well as their social media accounts. But we're going to go through our top three. So, Derek, what would you say is like your third favorite kit out of the kits that have been released?
Um, you know what? I think I gotta go the NOLA away kit. I think just out of the new ones. I've kind of excluded like the Free Jacks and Hounds because they're just always kind of nice or whatever.
Yeah.
But they're kind of boring to talk about at this point in time. Um, but I think like with NOLA, I kind of like their set as a whole. Like the home jersey has the like the quarters, but they kind of gave it a little like trapezoid rhombusy kind of look to it instead.
Mm,
So that's kind of a nice update. But I think it's NOLA seems like a team because I know they haven't changed their jerseys that often. They seem like a team that really understands what their brand is, right?
mm,
And I think part of that is that they had a third jersey that everybody loved, right? The Mardi Gras
yeah.
jersey, right? And it's really cool to see that they've incorporated that into their home and away set. So
Yeah.
I think that that's a great idea. Um, it's they keep their iconic quarters jersey, and then they kind of give their away jersey a bit of an update, to kind of reflect something that has been received very positively from the fans. Kind of a jersey. I'm just like everybody kind of wins that one.
Yeah. So my third was also Nola away, but I'm gonna quickly change it just to like mix it up and have something a bit different. So I'm actually
We
gonna
can
go.
agree on stuff sometimes.
We can, but this isn't one of them. So that is actually my third, but I'm gonna throw in like a different one just to mix it up. I will go with Utah's home kit because
Mm.
I I love their kit. I think they did like in 22, in 21 or 22, where they had like the mountain range on the front, something artistic that, separated it from just being like a, either a plain color or with a subtle background and stuff. I wanted something that was artistic, something that was featured, something that was beautiful.
Yeah.
And I have to say it has to be, you know, this is one. I mean, I think Zions Bank Stadium has the best backdrop in the entirety of MLR. Just having those,
MLR. The
yeah.
rugby is how you're supposed to end that sentence. Hmm.
And I've seen some pretty interesting places in like New Zealand. But anyway, just have it so the mountain range is like obviously iconic and having that on their jerseys, red and black, their traditional colors, the Intermountain Health logo fits in so cleanly and it looks so great. And then they have on their sleeves, they have like tradition, respect, all the brands and stuff. They have the four stripes that is now included in Utah's
They're-
ethos,
Yeah, yeah,
and
that's really cool.
and and yeah, there's like the faux collar, but it's something I can let slip by. I think it's a really beautiful kit.
Yeah.
Um, my second favorite one is I'm gonna go with another red jersey. This one is going to be San Diego. Now, San Diego's home kit is a bit naff. I mean, they don't have a logo on the design that they've released, but their away kit is
Is Team
um
Canada jersey.
yeah, it's essentially a
What that
Team
is.
Canada
That's a
jersey
Canada
with
jersey.
SD. So if you
Some
and
lightning bolts. Some lightning bolts instead of Maple Leaf.
yeah, but
Team
this
Canada.
one also has a collar on it as well. So
Yeah, colors are nice.
that tips the scales in favor. I mean, with Utah and San Diego having like a similar color mix, I think this one just
Doesn't.
really works. I'm interested to see what logo they do end up having. Goodness, I hope they do have a logo
The
or a
one I'm
sponsor
looking
on
at,
the
what are you
front.
talking about? The one I'm looking at has a logo on it.
San Diego away,
Like the black one?
the red one.
Yeah, it has a logo on it.
Oh, I'm looking on the USMLR Instagram page. That one doesn't have a logo on it.
Oh, that's weird. On their website, it has a logo.
Typical. Communication issues are always a thing in rugby, regardless of which league or format it is. But yeah, so the one on the Instagram page for
I was just saying, you
MLR.
keep saying no logo, and I'm like looking at it, and I'm like, they both definitely have logos on them.
Anyway, but anyway, that's my kit. Which is your second? What is your number two pick?
Utah Red. Um, it's yeah, no, Utah knocked it out of the park. This is unreal jersey. You already kind of talked about the black one a little bit. The red is obviously just kind of inverted, except for the fact that these stripes are white, and the mountain range is white. It's a really clean look, man. I love the I absolutely love the like the four stripes coming over the shoulder through the crest on both the jerseys. It looks amazing. And also weird, like little weird nitpick thing. These Macron jerseys, they got a weird piping thing going on.
Yeah,
They got
it's
a
something
very
that's
weird piping thing
applicable.
going on, at least in like these mock-ups. And it's why I quite frankly didn't put New England in my top three.
Mm.
Because New England's jersey does not hide that piping well. Utah hides it very well. So I think that gets bonuses. I think all the teams that hide it well. LA actually looked like they kind of incorporated it into the design. It looks nice, but um, so it's it's a, kind of a weird quirk on the MLR jerseys, but I think Utah's is kind of it looks good the way they actually kind of did it, keeping it red, keeping it black on the other one too, and I think it looks a lot nicer. It looks a little cleaner.
All
Um,
right.
jersey's outstanding.
And what is your number one kit that will obviously change our decision once these are all worn, but based on
Ah,
the images
on the
shown?
mock-up, you already talked about it. Utah Black, man. This thing is I think this thing is unreal. All the reasons that you said. Ultimately, I'm just like, it looks mean as hell. Like
Hmm.
it looks like if Darth Vader played rugby, this is what he's wearing. Right? Like this is what look. It's got the mountain in that he probably fears and got burned alive on it. But like, yeah, it's Mustafar. It's not whatever mountain range is in Utah. Um, but it's yeah, like it looks mean. It's got yeah, everything. The red really pops on the black. It looks outstanding for all those reasons you said. Um, yeah, man. If the Mighty Ducks was a rugby movie, this is what the bad guys wear. That's really what it comes down to.
Uh,
I love Utah nailed it. Utah has the best kits in the league right now.
yeah,
Going into this new year here.
yeah. My number one kit. This was a toss up because I think that Seattle's home kit, which reverts back to like the green and blue of for previous years,
Yeah,
like you mentioned with like the piping, I
piping
think
on Seattle's looks terrible.
I think it works just because the green
Oh,
is
really?
also used for like the accents on like the
Yeah.
sleeves and stuff, and then it becomes an accent throughout. So it's an accent on the collar. The green of the Macron logo also brings it all together, so it looks like a deliberate choice. But my number one kit from the renders shown is Miami's home kit.
Is that the pink
I,
one or the blue one?
that is the pink and blue one.
Okay, but like
Um,
the shoulders are blue.
uh, one sleeve is pink, one sleeve is blue. Um,
That's why I think
it
I like the pink one better than the blue one.
and
I
that's
do like
your
I like Miami. I like Miami's whole vibe though. It's fun.
yeah. I think Miami obviously sticking with like the blue and pink obviously
Yeah,
gives it a
color scheme.
a unique color scheme compared with the rest of the league.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know if the referees were too fond of having to abandon their, traditional pink referee jerseys to suit whatever Miami's doing. But I think, again, like I said, I like the artistic style that is used. I want something that's, pretty unique. I know we have a lot of hoops, in the league with like Chicago and New England. This is a very unique pattern. The Visa sponsor is all in white. The Macron logo is in white. The Miami Sharks logo is, has enough white to stand out, but it's still its own unique thing. Um, and yeah, the piping is black, but then the collar's black, the sleeve is black as well, the trim is black, so it does work.
Mhm.
Um, and yeah, I think it's a really unique kit, and yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing it on the field in next year, in next season.
Generally good all around. I'm not the biggest fan of the piping thing that seems to have happened on all of them, but
I think that's a
generally,
symptom of all Macron kits, not just
yeah,
MLR.
I know. I feel like there's
But
other like
yeah, but
Canada has a Macron kit too, and it's like
yeah,
it doesn't look like that. Or
yeah, I
you know what
suppose
I
so.
mean? Like it's
Yeah,
but there's I think all around solid effort. Like
yeah,
you said though, it seems like every year we see we see these jerseys, we see these kits, and it's like every time we actually end up seeing them actually on players,
yeah,
they kind of do look a little bit different. So it'll be
yeah,
interesting to see, but I think all around solid effort. It's a good
yeah.
miss, good kit miss morning.
I think it's a good first innings from Macron to do an
Yeah, no,
entire
it's solid. I
league's
mean,
kit.
I like honestly I like what Macron does with a lot of the teams that they have.
Yeah,
They like Canada's I think is a nice kit. Like and I think I know I went to Glasgow earlier this year. Got a bunch of the Glasgow Warrior stuff with just all Macron kit. Like it's good stuff. Like it is like it's nice. I like the brand. So excited to see what they do, not just with the jerseys, but with like the apparel range and stuff too. That I'm sure
yeah,
come soon. It's excited. Also, shout out to the league for releasing them all before Christmas,
yeah.
allowing people
So
to
so you
buy
can you
them.
can't so these are all pre-orders, and it seems like the pre-orders will only come in like February
Uh,
of 2025, which is admittedly in time for
but
when the league starts.
you
Um
can still buy it as a Christmas
yeah.
for someone. They just might not get it. I mean, if you order it in Canada, like, here we go. Politics jokes. Who knows when you
Yeah.
get it? Here we go. Canada
uh,
Post. I have
uh,
no interest in getting into that on this podcast.
all right, and we are going to conclude with news coming out of Premiership Women's Rugby, which is that TikTok sensation, um, Dancing in the Stars finalist, and Olympic bronze medalist Ilona Maher has signed with Bristol Bears Rugby on a 3-month deal with the aim to play at the Women's Rugby World Cup in 2025 in England. Since her announcement, the first available match that she could be available to play is the January 5th match with Gloucester Hartpury. That has now moved from the 200 capacity Shaftesbury Park to the 27,000 capacity Ashton Gate to cope with the increased ticket sales.
I can't believe
Um,
playing a stadium that's 200 seat capacity.
yeah,
Like
to
that's
be to me,
professional rugby team.
I don't know who thought that was a good idea, but even before Mar signed, but
Are we
what?
sure it's not 2000 and we missed a zero on the script?
No, I
Oh,
checked.
okay.
Yep,
Right,
Shaftesbury
cool.
Park. It has 200. It says 200 capacity. I don't know if that's seated and then there's standing options around it, but either way, that's
That's way too small.
pretty.
That's way too small.
Yeah, yeah. I yeah, that it's
Oh, wait,
kind of
this isn't the point.
disappointing regardless of, you're having.
Hey, they're playing in 27,000 seat stadium now. It's fine.
Yeah, so it all works
Ilona
out in the
Maher
end.
finds a cure for all. So
Yeah.
it's good.
So Mar's been doing loads of interviews, including this one with the BBC, where she said, "Rugby is my thing, but I have to create this whole other thing around me, which is a social media presence. Being on the pitch is amazing, but as a female athlete, as a female rugby player, I have to do 10 times as much off the field. I
Mhm.
can't just play the sport I love. I'm not going to make millions playing rugby. I'm not even going to make six figures playing rugby. That's the sad truth. I'm not going to be like a men's player. I can't put all my focus here. I have to put it into everything else as well. And somehow that's translated into being the biggest star in rugby because of my personality." And then she goes on to say, "I think rugby is in many ways stuck in the old ways. On the field, you have just got to work, and that's where it stops. But we have to grow as the world changes and as society changes. We want to get more players into the game. Where are those players? They're on TikTok. They're scrolling the apps. They're watching my little videos and going, 'Oh, look at this girl play rugby.'" And we spoke last year during the Men's Rugby World Cup of how content creators who wanted to share footage from the games and say like, "Wow, look at this amazing try," were immediately hit with copyright bans from World Rugby. And we went on going, why is this outdated approach being handled by World Rugby? This is how you're not driving interest in the sport. And it seems to be the mindset of the old guard and the old boys who still think that, TV is the end all and be all, and anyone who doesn't go through the official channels is not worth it. So I guess the question is, what can rugby learn from Ilona Maher's success?
Well, I guess, to bounce off your point there, that people consume content in numerous ways, and you need to have a presence on a lot of those, different social media apps. And TikTok is obviously like something that is blowing up. But I think the biggest thing you can learn from her success, I think there's two. I'm going to start with one, and then two might be an argument, but it'll be fun. Um, but I think one is rugby needs to learn to embrace players' individuality a lot more
Mm,
and allow their personalities to shine. Ilona Maher, excuse me, Ilona Maher has definitely done that through her TikTok page, but also, you kind of look at it and it's like, why is she the one that kind of blew up after the Olympics? Right? It's like you could probably even argue that she's not necessarily the best player on the team, right?
mm,
They won a bronze medal. Like even in Canada, we
mm,
got the silver medal winning team.
mm,
I haven't seen those players on TV shows or in Sports Illustrated swimsuit issues and stuff like that, right?
mm,
There's a lot. She's doing a lot after, right? And I think ultimately it's because, well, one, as she kind of mentioned, she puts her personality out there, right? So people
mm,
know who she is. And I think it goes to show that I think when marketing sports, what sports really is, like as far as professional sports, as far as people wanting to watch sports and engage with sports, being passionate about sports, being fans, um, right, is all sports really is it's to me, it's no different than movies. It's no different than comic books, no different than TV, plays,
mm.
novels, whatever. All sports is storytelling with a different medium, right? And
Mm.
like and obviously there's the athletic competition element of it, right? But like those types of stories, the reason we care about, movies, comics, etc., right, is because of the characters and like how you feel about those characters and stuff. More people are going to watch rugby if they care about the players
Mm.
on an individual level. And through Mayor's like TikTok and all that, right? Like, and any other social media channel, right? She has cultivated like a fan base that care about her,
Yeah.
right? None, right? And because they care about her, they care about the entire team as a whole and they want to watch rugby, right? You look at Bristol, right?
Yeah.
200 seat capacity stadium seems egregiously low, but
Mm.
press. But it's like, why do they now feel the need to move out of that stadium? To my knowledge, the only player signing that they've made is Ilona Maher, right?
Mm.
So that's it. Like people like are now magically coming because you have a player on your team that people care about, right?
Yeah.
They care about outside. Like you want to see Ilona Maher succeed because like for whatever reason, like you scroll through her TikTok, you think she's funny, you like the way her style of game, whatever it is, right? People have become a fan of her because they know something about her. There is basically no other rugby players really doing this
Yeah.
on any form of social media and stuff, right? And like I think rugby needs to embrace the idea of letting these players become like huge media personalities, right? Let them go off on TikToks. Let them, be Instagram. Like there's MLR players that have private Instagram accounts. It's
Mm.
like, quite frankly, it's not good enough in
Yeah.
24, right? If you want to have a private Instagram account for like your friends and family, by all means, right? But you need like a public face, right? And like you said, it's like you can go across like all sports and stuff, right? People like the sports that can make you care about the athlete's story does a lot more for making you care about that sport in general, right?
Mm.
Because you want to follow, you want to cheer for the athlete, you want to cheer for their success. It makes it more interesting. Or reverse, like because every good story, like it needs heroes. Every good story needs villains. If you're watching because you hate them, that's also fine. Like as long as you're watching, right? Like
Yeah.
Jake Paul is making millions of dollars because people just want to see his ass get knocked out, right?
Mm.
It's making you're paying to watch them get knocked out though, right? So you're paying, right? And
Yeah.
that's right, and that's not even a real athlete, um, right? But like, so I think you can kind of go to that. I do have a second thing though, but that second thing might be an argument too.
Come on, it's the last episode of the year, may as
Last
well.
episode of the year. All right.
Yeah.
So, um, Ilona Maher, excellent
Yeah.
player, right? Agreed. Is
Hmm.
she more known for playing sevens or 15s?
Sevens.
Sevens, right? She'll
Yeah.
probably be a great 15s player, but like we're in agreement that she's a sevens player, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What did sevens rugby do in 2023 in regards to the jerseys? Give you a second to think about it. Let me ask you a question. What number is Ilona Maher? Do you know?
I
Should know.
don't.
I should
I.
have checked
I.
if you knew before this podcast. Can you name any sevens player's jersey number? Just shout them out if you got them.
No.
No? All right. Well, you're ruining my point. So maybe this won't be an argument. The point I'm trying to make is that Sevens made a switch on their jerseys that players were going to wear last names on the back, right? That's something we think is good. And they also
Okay.
squad numbers, right? They go to squad numbers. They no longer just wear 1 through 12, right? So
Okay. Yeah.
Ilona Mar is
Hmm.
number 2, right?
Hmm.
That means that every single game, if you watched her on TikTok and then wanted to tune into the Olympics, right? She's the one wearing Mar 2 on her back.
Mm.
Easy, right? And guess
Yeah.
what? No matter what day you turn that in on, it's the same thing every single game. right?
Okay.
R2,
All right.
R2
All right.
on the back. You look at every other women's team loss. Piper Logan, 11 every single game, right? Jersey says Logan 11. Um, Pambuisa went all out for this, and it's honestly, it's kind of great to see on a rugby jersey. 99, right? Every game,
Mm,
99, right?
yeah.
And I think, right? So when you watch these players play, right, you can identify them very, very easily, right?
Yeah.
And is it a coincidence that within 2 years of doing that, the biggest rugby star in the world is a sevens player, right?
Mm,
They
uh,
play in the
I'd say it helps, but
definitely
I
help. My
well,
question is though, right? Because my first point is we need to embrace player individuality.
yeah.
Last names on the backs of jerseys,
Yeah.
I think, like it to me, it's honestly it's insane that this it doesn't happen. It should be on every single team, every single player,
Yeah.
figure it out, right? My bigger question though is like because somebody who likes, even if they watch Dancing with the Stars and they tune into the next sevens tournament, I guess, well, maybe not because she's not playing in the sevens tournament right now. But the point being is that like, you could turn it on and every single game she's wearing Mar 2 on the back, no matter what, right? Easy to identify. And my question is honestly, if I'm saying that we need to allow rugby players to embrace their individuality anymore, is it time to get rid of the 1 through 23 position numbers and allow guys to pick jersey numbers and wear the same number all the time in an effort to maybe make them as individual players more recognizable on a field?
Hmm. That is a that's a good question. Um, I'd say from my perspective, I think that um again, you're going to have a big task of convincing the old guard of getting rid of the traditional 1 through
But
23.
that's
But
the only
but
argument.
but hang on, let me finish.
Sure.
But I do agree. I think you could probably even do something along the lines of what's done in like the NFL, where a certain range of numbers are associated with different teams. In terms of like so, for example, take the Kansas City Chiefs. Their defensive team will have numbers from um,
They're kind of getting
within a
rid of
certain thing,
it.
and
I
then
get what you're saying, but they're kind
yeah,
of moving away from that now.
I get. But I think that's like
I
the
get what you're saying
bridge
though.
to get individual numbers. You'll say like, okay, the forwards choose
Hockey kind
between.
of does that too. Like the goal
Pardon?
hockey kind of does that too. Like goalies traditionally are like 129, 30. Like
Yeah, and
traditionally, there's a bunch of guys that don't do that, but
yeah.
traditionally.
So it'll be like, okay, like the forwards, the front row can be between one and like you can have all like the entire forwards, they'll be between the numbers 1 and 40. The backs will be between numbers
You can do that. Well,
50 and 80, and then if there's like a
I think
special game, then or a player's comes in and they're the this number for another team, they have between like 80 and 99 to pick that other number if they so wish.
yeah, like I mean, however you want to do it. I mean, personally, I would just be like, you can pick anything between 1 and 99 and go nuts. Um, but like I just think like rugby is the only sport in the world that doesn't individually identify players.
Hmm.
Then we wonder why people don't know who the players are.
Yeah,
And it's like because like quite frankly, so like here was also kind of my point, right? Let's say like when's the MLR season start? It's like
I
mid.
believe it's early Feb.
All right. So okay. So let's say you have the early Feb and then like whatever series is going to start on February in February. Say there's a sevens tour and an MLR game in February. I'm sure it crosses at some point, right? I can look at Like I can look at the men's team and be like the men's sevens team or whatever and be like, Deshaun Bowen's gonna wear 14 because that's his number, right? As I said, Piper Logan is gonna wear 11. Monique
Yeah.
Coffey's gonna wear 55, right? These players, like I know what numbers Lucas Rumball gonna wear in February, right? Honestly, I have
Yeah.
no idea. It depends on the day, right? Is he 6?
Yeah.
Is he 7? Is he 8? Is he 19? Is he 20? Like no one
Yeah.
knows, right? And if I tune in to the game in February and be like, man, I really like number 7, this Rumball guy, right?
Hmm.
And then tune in 2 weeks later, right? And be like, oh, like I really like number 7, and then you see that it's a different player. Like, what do you do with that information?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think that's the same guy that I was cheering for 2 weeks ago, right? Like,
Yeah.
you can't do it. And you have the player, like, we don't have a way to do it. And then obviously, like, the last name thing, like, last name should be on every jersey, anyways. But I think, like, last names help, but the number is also kind of like the biggest thing that's on a jersey,
Yeah.
right? The last names do help.
I will say the biggest difficulty you'll have is then who is number eight.
Pick anybody. Anybody can wear number 8.
No,
Why'd you
who
name a
plays the
position?
position of number eight?
Who cares? You can still call a position number 8. You're still the eighth guy in the scrum. It still
Uh,
makes sense. You're still the eighth
uh,
player in the scrum. You can make it.
yeah, I suppose you're right. I
Okay.
think that is a question we'll
That'd be cool. You want to be the 8 man? Be 88. Go
all
all in
right.
on the 8.
Either all right. Okay, that is gonna be the question we'll ask over the holiday period of do you change the position? Do you change the name of number eight? And if so, what would you change it to?
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's a very good question. As we said, Mayer's first match won't be until January at the earliest. And if you want to watch any of those matches in the Premiership Women's Rugby, you can do so on the Rugby Network. The Champions and Challenge Cup is also available on epcrugby.tv. And when it returns, the Premiership and URC will be available on Sportsnet. And while we intend to be back in January, if for whatever reason we're not able to make it in time, you can catch the next round of the Sevens in Perth on CBC. And if you enjoyed this episode, be sure to check out more, as well as our written pieces on our website, therougerugby.ca. You can also find our podcast directly on Spotify. We have our YouTube channel at The Rouge Rugby with episodes of podcasts. Make sure to like and subscribe and hit the bell notification to stay up to date with all our videos. We're also available across social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Threads, and Blue Sky, all at The Rouge Rugby. Derek, where can people find you on social media?
At Reset the Jet across all social media networks.
And you can find me across social media at Hardman, spelled H4RDMAN. Well, that's where we're going to end this episode. Derek, thank you for joining me, and thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Rouge Rugby podcast. This is our final episode for 2024. So we won't be seeing you on the big day, but we wish you a very happy holidays. And if they can't be happy for you, then we hope they are at least peaceful. We'll be back in the new year with more episodes of the Rouge Rugby podcast, where we talk about real Canadian rugby. We hope you can join us again next time.